Good evening. Welcome to the Hingham Board of Selectmen meeting for Tuesday evening, March 6th, 2018. Calling the meeting to order. The board does not have any approval of minutes this evening. The next item on the agenda is public comment. Mr. Hersey, could you go to the microphone, please?
My name is John Hersey. I have a letter I'd like to read tonight. Dear Board of Selectmen, it is my understanding this board is considering appointing Tom Mayo as permanent town administrator without doing its due diligence of searching for a new and best candidate for this position. I feel this is a violation of town administrator bylaw. I see that this board is not following its own procedure by adopting the bylaw recommendations. Hold meeting to provide town citizens an opportunity to provide input. No interview process. This is from the bylaws. The town administrator shall be appointed solely on the basis of executive and administration qualifications, and shall be a person of proven professional ability fitted by education, training, and previous full-time employment in a responsible public or business administrative position. We know nothing of Mr. Mayo. Keep the Board of Selectmen fully informed as to the needs of the town and make recommendations to the board. Why do we have $2.5 million deficit? I don't believe it's been cut back. In light of the seriousness financial crisis our town is facing, in this board is not acting responsibly to its citizens, and I demand to have answers to my questions and be put on the agenda of next week's Selectmen's meeting.
Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you. I would just note for the record that as part of the board's meeting last week, we recommended a balanced budget for the advisory committee's consideration. The advisory committee is actually voting a budget this evening at 7:30 in the room next door for anybody who's interested. The next item on the agenda is a road building update. Roger, welcome. We've got a lot of our utility partners here, so we thought that this would be a good time to, come on, Harry, that this would be a good time as well to take a look at this.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Hello, board members, and those in attendance.
Hey, Roger.
Good to see you.
Yeah, right.
Joined by Harry and
Harry.
Tom Molinari, who also works out of our
Everybody,
office.
the gang's all here.
Emily.
Everybody's here.
Lonnie.
Me and Emily.
All going on.
So mindful of time, I know you have a full agenda. We have about five minutes or so to discuss this. I just want to give you a real quick retrospective and then talk to you really quickly about what we've got planned for next year. But ostensibly, last year we did, and I have that here, about $2.34 million worth of road work. That was a combination of state aid, Chapter 90, local funding through our local road building initiative, and the bond issuance that took place the year prior. We expedited the work, and in the grand scheme of things, that's a good thing, only because it afforded us the opportunity to realize some savings in terms of where the asphalt prices were. So the town actually realized the savings by timing, if you will, the road construction, where the petroleum prices were relatively low when we compare those to prior years. So along with Harry, Tom, and Carol, who works in my office, I want to commend them publicly for their hard work and everything they've done to sort of help manage that additional work without adding any additional staffing to the department. Next year, we do have a list. I'll really run through the list of proposed roads for 2018. We have a 5-year plan, of course. That list is extensive. That list will be posted online for those who want to see that, but in the interest of time. We have Black Horse Lane, Butler Road, Camelot Drive, Child Street, Craig Lane, Cypress Circle, Harvard Drive, Lazelle Street, Maple Street, Pine Grove Road, Prospect Street, Ridge Hill Road, Sherwood Road, Simmons Road, and Smith Road, along with Stanford Drive. If you didn't hear all that, again, don't worry, we'll have that posted online. And that's only the first of a 5-year plan. Again, retrospectively speaking, we had, some years ago, we introduced a long-term capital plan that looked to invest in our infrastructure. We had projected a 20-year outlay. We are approaching year 9. This year will be year 9, so really we're into year 8. And we're right on target, actually, with the infusion of additional money with respect to the bond. 1 out of every 2 roads had received attention this year, and by attention we mean that the road was actually either resurfaced or reconstructed. So 50% of our roads, since that initial discussion back in 2009, have received attention. So we're right on track, and given the 20-year plan and with the additional fusion, we're ahead of schedule, which is in sync, if you will, with what we originally planned during that time frame. This upcoming year, we have a total of $1.45 million scheduled. That's a combination, again, of those prior funding sources that I identified, Chapter 90, what's left in our bond, which is about $360,000, plus the $284,000 that we locally fund, and the $450,000 that we plan to use as part of the road restoration on Main Street that ties into the gas main replacement that we talked about a few weeks back. For those of you who don't know, just for the sake of restating real quickly, there's a substantial gas main replacement scheduled on Main Street, approximately 7,000 plus square feet, and the intent is to replace that gas main that's approximately 100 years old and repave Main Street. So again, an additional $450,000 will go towards specifically that initiative. So again, when we combine the two, we're in the neighborhood of $1.4 million worth of scheduled road construction work next year. So again, being mindful of time, with that, I would defer to the
Before
board.
I turn over to my colleagues for questions, Roger, can you just please, again, for the benefit of the audience, explain the 5-year moratorium? Because inevitably, citizens who, would like to do some sort of a utility hookup often get surprised. So could you just explain that?
Sure. So we put forth a 5-year moratorium. That's not only our particular, it's a Department of Public Utilities sort of rule that allows us some ability to restrict with penalty, if you will, cutting roads that were recently paved. The objective there, of course, is to, given the investments that take place in our infrastructure, and it's substantial, as I demonstrated. I mean, you just talked about millions of dollars. The hope is to be able to not have folks cut roads after we've reconstructed those or paved those. So as a result, there's a 5-year moratorium placed on these roads that restricts those cutting of the road. If folks do cut the road, then the restoration associated with cutting that road is fairly extensive, given the investment that the residents put into the road. So that's the minimum amount that we look for. But that doesn't mean if we've recently paved the road that, if it's year 6, Harry and our team would look at that and say, hey, it's year 6, but the road's still in great shape. We're looking for something that's more extensive in terms of restoration. But again, statutorily, the minimum is 5 years, and after that, we look at it on a case-by-case basis.
And that case-by-case basis comes into this room.
It does.
So
It does.
it's in all our interests to avoid that.
Absolutely. We do not want that.
I just want to make note that
Please, Harry.
the 5-year moratorium will start till the following construction season, so we don't get into months and days. So the first year wouldn't be this year with the roads that are being paved this year. It would start next year.
Yep. Thank you. Karen or Paul, questions for Roger or Harry?
Comments. I take it you notify all the contractors that have subsurface utilities well in advance of when you're doing the work?
We do. So one of the objectives of the 5-year plan, it helps us sort of, from a fiduciary standpoint, outlay what we have to do and what we need to do. It also informs the residents, but one of the bigger components is, of course, being able to provide the utility companies well in advance a notification process that says in year 5, we're going to be out here. So if your utilities need upgrading, here's your opportunity, year 5, 4, 3, 2, and hopefully not 1, although we've had that same year, Harry's worked and Tom has worked with those folks to say, hey, get it in April, we'll be there in July and August. So we really do try to provide abundant notice to those utility companies, and the hope is to be able to continue to do that, yeah.
I mean, not only do we reach out to the utility companies and give them our 5-year plan, but we also do an in-house inspection as far as age, leak history on certain roads and utilities. And if we see, something that looks like it needs to be attended to, then we also adjust that with utility companies as well.
And if I remember right from a few weeks ago, that was, as we were talking about the Main Street project, that there were a number of gas leaks that are along that Main Street section that this replacement project is going to address.
So we're able to track the leaks in our office when they pull the permits. So when we begin to develop the plan, hey, gosh, in the last year you've had 6 leaks on this road. So it's a red flag for us. We meet with the respective utility companies, say you've got an extensive leak history here or a problem at this location by virtue of the permits that you've pulled. And so we really try to take instead of a reactive approach, proactive approach in terms of telling them that there seems to be a problem. And so that helps us continue to develop the plan.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I noticed in 2019, there were 35 water leaks in various roadways. Do you work with the water company to coordinate replacement of those pipes, or how does that go?
Speak to that, or you want me?
Yes, we do. Water's a little bit more difficult to assess than gas. The pipes are, stronger, the thicker the steel, and it's hard to predict, aging water main as opposed to an aging gas main. The gas mains were all, the ones that they're replacing now, 90% of them are bare steel, and they're over 100 years old. When Steve comes up, maybe we could address the age of their mains and what they expect to get out of it. But the leak histories, if I notice a certain leak history on a water main, I'll bring it to his attention. A lot of those leaks that fall in front of you were probably from service lines and not water mains themselves. If we had a number of those on a certain road, with a certain time period, of course, we bring those to their attention.
Well, the reason I ask is, as you know, we get the email notifications when there's a leak, water leak. And Arnold Road seems to keep popping up. And I'm just wondering if the work you're doing on Main Street could facilitate any kind of repair to keep that from reoccurring.
We're addressing that with the water company as we go through this process. They're aware of it, and they'll have to repair the problem prior to the paving. They'll be responsible to pave it in kind if they do have a leak following the paving.
To your point, Mr. Yoder, so what we do try to communicate to them based on our records and based on the leak history, and some of that, as Harry mentioned, is not only the mains, it's the service connections. In either case, the difference is that whether it gets cut for the main or the service connection, in both cases it's unacceptable. We don't want to cut the road, irrespective of what it might be for. So it's a matter of, Aquarion Water making those resources available. In this particular case, we will let them continue to put them on notice in terms of the work coming up, and hope that there's funding available in their capital plan to address some of these issues and be ready to invest in such a way that we don't have to cut the road in the future.
Well, are they keeping up with you? Bottom line.
In some cases, yes. In some cases, no. In some cases, no. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you detailed significant investment by the town of local funds as well as state funds in maintaining and upgrading our infrastructure. Our roadways are key to the health of the town, and the 5-year moratorium allows us to maintain the integrity of the roadway. So, it's pretty important to us, I think, that all the folks that you've copied on this 5-year plan letter understand that significance, and I guess the consequence of cutting the road and then the repair of the road is on them, as I understand it.
It is.
Okay, anything else for Roger or Harry?
I guess that to Harry's point, in addition to these external parties, it sounded like we do some sort of internal review to see. So when we were here last week, there was a question on drainage on Main Street, for instance, which would fall to us. So when we're looking out at paving these roads and going through the moratorium, we're doing our own internal check to see if there's anything else we want to improve on the roadway as well.
Absolutely, the Public Works Maintenance Group downstairs, they have the list of, we have, and we're in communication with them constantly, telling them what's going on and what has to be inspected before we go up there and pave these roads.
Great. Okay.
Thank you. And just Roger and Harry, as the roadwork starts every year, I think we get better every year at communicating to the residents when things are going to be happening. And I would just encourage us to continue to do that. It's not only notifying residents of a potential inconvenience of road work, but also to the extent that residents are interested in, hooking up the gas. The more people know about it, the better. And, I know the list is up in the building department and it's on the website, but I do think that the effort that we take to notify residents by mail and things like that is very, very helpful and very appreciated by the residents. So, I hope that sort of communication will take place throughout this road building season, and hopefully that the weather will cooperate. And it's a lot of roads you want to do this year, so getting started early. I'd also point out to my colleagues that Roger does a good job at hanging on to some of the Chapter 90 funds from this past fiscal year, so that at this time of year,
We can get
when
going.
a lot of communities are out of money, Roger's got the money, and sometimes the crews are more available. And so, by looking at the timing of the cash flow, I think it allows us to implement this schedule very quickly, and we appreciate that extra effort. I think it's one of the many variables at why this has been so successful.
Well, I was going to say, I remember when advisory committee took up additional funds for road work, and the Board of Selectmen also made road work a priority, but then we hand it to you, and you have to figure out the logistics of all of it. And so to come back and be able to report that you've been able to touch 50% of the road since that time is pretty incredible. So I think it's a good service to the citizens, for sure.
Thank you very much.
Terrific.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
I'm going to step back and let
Yep.
Harry sit up.
Harry, I think you're going to stay because we've got a couple of hearings. So the first one is a public hearing on a request for Aquarion that relates to Butler and Sherwood Road. Steve, could you join Harry at the table? Welcome. Thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Could you or Harry just give us an overview of this grant of location request, please?
Sure. It's actually good that we're following the previous
Hi,
presentation.
Tom. Welcome.
We've been working and coordinating this project with the DPW as part of their road improvement project. So these two streets have been on our radar for half a year or more. We're happy to get in there and do our water main replacement and get out so the DPW can replace the roadway. So we're doing 3 roads, portions of Butler, Sherwood, and Smith Road. There's some existing water mains from 1930s and 1940s there, 2¼ inch size. So we're proposing to do about 1,100 feet on Butler Road, about 1,050 feet on Sherwood Road, and about 300 feet on Smith Road. Those are all to replace existing mains. We're going to provide a loop around Sherwood and Butler to prevent dead ends, which will improve water quality. And we'll also including 2 proposed hydrants that'll increase the fire flow availability. We've had a public meeting last week for anybody in the area that wanted to attend. We only had a few people. Also since then, since notifying abutters about this meeting, we've had several phone calls and discussed issues and questions with some of the customers and residents. So we feel like we're in good shape. Everyone's excited for the new water main, excited for the new road, and we're coordinating with the DPW to have a pre-construction meeting next week in hopes of getting in there the third week in March and start construction. So the project's been designed, it's been bid, we have a contractor ready to go, under contract, and I guess it's all weather dependent on when we can break ground and start going.
Any ledge issues?
There is some ledge at the beginning, but it's not all ledge, so we have quantities of rock in our budget and in the contract.
Do you anticipate having a chip?
I would anticipate a ram hole rather than any sort of blasting, yes.
How much?
How much? I don't have the quantities in front of me.
How long?
How long?
Yeah.
Maybe upwards of a week or two. It depends on, the depth and the exact location.
On Smith Road?
Most likely, I think the beginning of Butler Road is where the ledge, you can see ledge outcrops. We're only doing about 300 feet, 300 to 500 feet into Smith, just to make that connection with the existing larger main. The water main size we're proposing is 8-inch, and as I mentioned, the existing main is about 2 1/4 inches in diameter.
Karen?
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about when and how long as well. So, when we grant this location, we sort of turn it over to you to then run the project for what fits with you, but also what fits for the town. So, in addition to the notice of conditions here and the notice to the residents of this issuance, grant of location issuance, I think it's helpful to make sure that you reach out to the residents prior to the start of the work.
Yep.
And I think that's
And we have,
that's
yeah.
part of our practice. Well, no, I realize that you have, but I guess once you set on a date, like you're saying, okay, about the third week of March, but once you determine a date, I think we'd like to see the residents notified
Sure,
of
yes.
that start date.
Yep.
And also just this projection of sort of how long it's going to be. Even though it's not a huge project for these residents, it is a huge project, so it's also be helpful to have, somebody they can contact in the event of questions. And then, do you anticipate this work taking place during the day? Is this a daytime?
Yes, yep.
Okay.
Normal work hours are 7 to 4:30. The contractor has a duration of 60 days, and, the clock is ticking, so they'll be done by the middle of May, early May, depending on when they start in progress. And we will have an inspector there on site representing the company if there are any issues or questions that come up with customers as project progresses. The contractor we have is N. Sabati, and last year they did Simmons Road. I think the DPW was pleased with their work. Very good contractor, excellent qualifications and reputation, so we're happy to have them again.
Great. And once they're in, there's no diversion from the project. They're committed to
Correct.
finishing this work,
Yep.
right? And do we know if there are any bus stops along those roads?
There is not a bus stop, but the buses go through. I believe they enter from Hersey onto Butler, and then they turn left on Smith Road, if I'm correct.
Okay. Okay. I think that's it for me.
Okay. Steve, just kind of while you're here and just in light of what the information Roger just shared about the road building program, I know this is an example of the partnership that we have with the utilities with the road. Will there be any other, will there be any more water main replacements this summer on any, Roger's just read off a list of about 15 roads.
We're proposing some work on Elmore, which is a private road, and Hayes, but I don't think any of the other,
Okay.
I haven't looked recently.
Yep, and I know Roger read off those streets pretty, I was, just as I was looking at this, I know that we've gotten the grant of location information for those other two streets. I guess what I'm just wondering is, are we missing an opportunity on some of these other streets to, replace any of the water mains?
Well, we'd like to do more water mains, more footage per year, but, we have a certain budget, and we're trying to keep up with the DPW and,
Yeah.
meeting with them once or twice a year to schedule things. Currently, right now, we're doing a comprehensive evaluation of our distribution system, looking at leak history and fire flow availability to come up with a And also the DPW's paving plans to come up with a comprehensive, prioritization of where we should go next. So we have the DPW's, there's road building thing list, and we're trying to match that with our needs for, other aspects besides just, repaving the road.
Because my sense is too that if we can all do this work together, that everybody's individual piece is perhaps a little bit less expensive.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I think it's in all of our benefits. I just, I looked, we've got a rate case, there's a rate case that's pending, and I went into the DPU has something called a file room, which is basically all the documents that were filed. And I looked at the capital plan. I think it's probably a little bit outdated because, for example, I know you're undertaking a big project with the water tower,
Yep.
Over over near Accord. But as I was looking at the, the amount of money for water mains for Hingham and Hull, it looked like it was about $40,000 a year. And I'm just, I'm trying to look at that, and I'm looking at, this extensive list from Roger, and I don't know if this is the most updated capital plan, but I would just take this opportunity to emphasize that, as Paul said, we get a lot of the emails when their water main breaks, and, to the extent that I think if the water mains can be replaced when we're in there for the other utilities, the dollars you're spending go farther. And I think we all recognize that there are parts of the water infrastructure that are aging. And it would be a real shame if we, miss some of these opportunities on the roads. And, I know resources are scarce. We balanced a budget last week and had, we know that there are a lot of tough choices to be made, but, we did want to just take this opportunity to encourage more of the partnership like we see on Butler, Sherwood, and Smith Road.
Yep.
I do want to add that next year there's 6 roads that are listed for reconstruction that we've been in discussion about getting those water mains replaced as well.
Yeah, and I would also just add that it's funny, but you have residents that pay pretty close attention to this list as well. And I know I've gotten stopped by residents when their road has been deferred. So I appreciate that we're getting out in front of this for 2019, because if your road is on the list and it's coming and it's coming and it's coming, and all of a sudden it gets bumped 2 years, it's, while as Roger said, 50% of the town roads have been touched. If your road is one of the ones that hasn't been touched and it's deferred, you're disappointed. So I appreciate that you're looking out, especially with those reconstructions.
Yeah.
I would just like to add, ladies and gentlemen, that the Board of Selectmen do not choose which roads get paid first. Okay, just put it out there.
I live on one of the,
The highway.
I live on one of the untouched roads.
I live on an untouched road too. We know who lives on a road that's been touched. Steve, just a final question. It's again, while we're here and talking about the road, and I know I had a conversation with John Walsh a couple of weeks ago and asked, but we are about to undertake this huge project on Main Street.
Ask about that too.
And, it's going to be a 3-year project. National Grid's going to be in there.
Hugely disruptive.
It's going to be a lot of night work and things, but, I would just ask if you can, that work is going to begin over the next couple weeks. We would certainly appreciate if you could, consider whether there's any benefit and potential to getting in there and doing that work. And so if you can follow up with Harry and with Tom and with Roger after this meeting, we'd appreciate it.
Absolutely. Just to comment on several of your points and questions, we're very aware of the Main Street gas relocation project. I just got the plans today. We've been marking out the water services and water mains for the past couple of weeks. We know how far it's going, and the distribution system study that we're doing will definitely include taking a good look at Main Street. you referenced the capital plan that was submitted with the rate case. It is a little bit outdated at this point
It
because of the
seemed to me it
abeyance.
was, yeah.
It has been updated. Water main, our budget for water main is 1.6 million, so maybe some of the columns or rows didn't add up, but we're about 1.6 million, which is pretty significant. And the Aqua tank project, briefly, that project is started. The contract is on site. They're erecting scaffolding. They're going to encapsulate it in a week or two. We're going to be taking the tank offline next week. We've been coordinating with the fire department,
Yep.
the DPW, critical customers, our own staff, the Norwell Water Department in case it's an emergency. And, we're really excited about the project, and it's going to hopefully, create a nice bright spot in that area of town rather than a rusty spot. So we're looking
Thank
forward to
you.
that project, which should be finished by the end of May, just so everyone knows.
I would just ask you to keep in mind on Main Street, and I know it sounds like you're undertaking a very comprehensive study.
Yeah.
Just please be aware that there's about 1.5 miles or so of Main Street that is going to get opened up, beginning in a couple of weeks and going through the summer. And, to the extent that we can be opportunistic on that stretch of Main Street, I think it's to all of our collective benefit.
Yeah, and I think I didn't realize we could talk about this at this stage, but, when we were talking about the water main, or the gas lines last time around, really aging infrastructure on Main Street. And so it just, I don't know whether you know how old your pipes are along that stretch, but, unless they've been replaced recently, my guess is they're fairly old. In addition to kind of the budgetary issues, as I sort of interrupted Mary, it's just really the disruption issues to the town. So part of it is we've all got to brace ourselves for what's going to be highly disruptive, but for a very good purpose. And again, if we could count on your partnership to minimize that disruption to the citizens,
Absolutely.
to provide, the level of both gas service as well as water service, we would appreciate that.
How old are the water mains on Main
I'm
Street?
not sure of the age, but the pipe is in decent condition. It's a 20-inch main. It's one of the main transmission mains that carry water through the town, so that's in very good condition, but we'll take another look at. It's more the side streets off of that we're concerned.
Yep.
I know that the project's either starting or ending at Playground Road, which we did
Correct.
2 years ago, and then going up that way. So it's more the side streets and
Yeah.
looking at
Yeah.
potentially leaving stubs off the road so we wouldn't have to do it.
Yep.
Right,
And-
right.
Yeah, so, we're sort of, we're sort of talking about both the road building update that's on our agenda and this particular project, but I think, again, we've got a lot of our utility partners here, and just talking about how we can all work together on road building, I think is to all of our benefit. Are there any questions from the audience on the grant of location for Butler, Sherwood, and Smith Road?
Motion?
Okay, do you want to make a motion?
Sure. I move that we approve the request of Aquarion to install and maintain approximately 2,150 feet of 8-inch ductile iron water main in Butler Road and Sherwood Road. The new main will originate at the intersection of Hersey Street, connecting into the existing 12-inch main, and continue under the paved surface of Butler Road for the entire length and continuing around the entire loop of Sherwood Road. This new main replacement project will replace and upgrade an undersized 2¼ inch cast iron pipe. Also, this project will include new water services and 2 new hydrants as well. In addition, as part of this project, the request includes installing and maintaining approximately 300 feet of 8-inch ductile iron water main in Smith Road. The new main will originate at the new 8-inch ductile iron main installed in Butler Road and continue under the paved surface of Smith Road to completion at number 48 Smith Road. This new main replacement project will replace and upgrade an undersized 2¼ inch cast iron pipe. Also, this project will include new water services. This approval is subject to the stipulation of the Department of Public Works as outlined in the letter dated February 14th, 2018.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Steve, thank you very much.
Thanks for coming in.
Just want to mention one thing about the project. Once the water main is replaced, that means that whole neighborhood we'll have the gas and the water replaced over the last 5 years. So then, hopefully,
Shouldn't have to go back there.
you shouldn't have to go back.
Excellent, excellent.
I'm writing that down,
Good.
Yeah.
Harry.
Okay.
We heard it here.
Next, we've got National Grid. Barbara, why don't you please come up? You've gotten a preview to some of
Yeah.
the questions we're going to ask.
Welcome back, Barbara.
Thank you. So again, we've got these 2 grants of location, but in conjunction with the road building update, we might have 1 or 2 questions about that piece of it. But why don't we start with Bulow Road, if we could, please?
Okay. Do you want me to read it, or do you want to?
Yeah.
The National Grid hereby respectfully requests your consent to install and maintain approximately 150 feet, more or less, of 2-inch gas main in Bulow Road in Hingham, from the existing 2-inch steel gas main at Lincoln Street, southwesterly to the intersection of Bulow Road and Bulow Place, and approximately 220 feet, more or less, of 2-inch gas main in Bulow Place, from the 2-inch gas main in Bulow Road to the end of main at house number 6, all of which to replace and abandon the existing 2-inch steel gas main in Bulow Road and Bulow Place.
Okay. Questions from my colleagues?
Seems straightforward.
And when, Barbara, do you have a timeline for this?
I don't. They'll probably apply for the permit immediately
Okay.
after we, that's-
Nothing definitive as yet for the Bulow.
Okay.
We're gonna try to accelerate the Stanford Drive one first, because that's.
Oh, I think you mentioned that. Yeah,
That's in the
okay,
construction schedule for this year.
okay.
I would expect them to get started with Stanford Drive. We discussed that fairly soon.
Okay. And so you'll notify residents prior to the work
Yes, they-
taking place? Okay. And do you have some sense of how long this particular project might take?
Oh, that's not, won't take long. Plastic?
I think, 3 or 4 weeks probably.
Okay. And then I note in our approval that you have to get state approval for Lincoln Street, so we sort of grant our grant of location and then,
That's a state road, right, Lincoln Street is.
and so you have to get a separate grant of
That's correct,
location from the
yes.
state?
Yeah,
Okay.
correct.
And are the conditions for Lincoln Street similar to the conditions, or does the project in total have to adhere to our conditions?
Actually, if I'm not reading the map right, it's not going out to Lincoln Street at all, really. It's
Okay.
kind of tying in.
It's just really Bulow Road and Bulow Place?
Yes, correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Paul, did you have a question?
Harry, the outer lanes of 3A in that area leave much to be desired in terms of potholes and whatnot. I'm just wondering, do you know whether the roadway's on the horizon or the calendar for the state to do anything about, or
No, I haven't heard anything as far as their construction schedule at all.
is that?
They don't necessarily notify us
the
when they do
loudest,
that,
or? It seems like it's in pretty rough shape.
Yeah, it is. The last time they did it, they did kind of experimental paving over there. I mean, they milled it and they didn't level it, and they just went over and tried to match all the castings, and the profile didn't could put back in properly, I don't think. And they use an open graded mix. I mean, I don't get involved with it. They don't notify us too much when they're doing a road, except, maybe 2 weeks prior. They just come in and do it. No comment on that. I've said too much already, probably.
All right, I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
All right, just have to
I won't write that part.
go in another direction.
Barbara, you've been to these meetings before, and,
Yes,
you
yeah.
heard some of the questions and the comments from the board with respect to resident notification and being mindful of the site, et cetera. And, we would just reiterate how important that is on any of these different projects. Anyone in the audience have a question or comment on the Bulow Road and Bulow Place? Oops, yes, I beg your pardon. Could you come up to the microphone and just introduce yourself if you could?
Karen would like, I'll be happy to do the motion. Save it.
Hi.
Hi,
I'm
welcome.
Marissa Davis. I live on Bulow Place, number 6. You said 3 to 4 weeks for the project. Would service be disrupted for that length of time?
No, God, no, they don't, they
Lay a
won't shut
new
their
line
service
and then-
off, not, no, they'll just, they put in the line, then they'll tie it over.
Okay, great.
My engineering degree that I got at the last meeting that we had was that they lay it all out and then they let you know, and they do the shut you off quickly and tie you back up quickly.
Okay, perfect. And then, do you know when you're done, if you plan on repaving the whole road or just the trench that's dug?
Bulow Road and Bulow Place were on the road construction schedule for next year, so they're gonna be doing, the gas main replacement this year and
In the water.
and possibly the water next year. We're working on it now, there's nothing definitive, but until both utilities get replaced, I mean, it is on the schedule, hopefully it won't get deferred,
Okay.
but it's on the short horizon.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
All set?
Yeah,
Thank you for
thank you.
coming.
Thanks for coming.
Do you want to make the motion?
Paul said you would do it.
Okay.
I move that we approve the request of National Grid to install and maintain approximately 115 feet of 2-inch gas main in Bulow Road. This gas main will originate from the existing 2-inch main in Lincoln Street and continue under the paved surface of Bulow Road to completion at the intersection with Bulow Place. This gas main will replace an existing 2-inch coated steel decayed main that is approximately 63 years old. In addition, as part of this project, the request includes to install and maintain approximately 220 feet of 2-inch gas main in Bulow Place. This gas main will originate from the existing 2-inch plastic main in Bulow Road and continue under the paved surface of Bulow Place to completion at number 6. This gas main will replace an existing 2-inch coated steel decayed main that is approximately 63 years old. This approval is subject to the stipulation of the Department of Public Works as outlined in the letter dated February 15th, 2018.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And then Barbara, we have a request for Stanford Drive.
Correct. This one, the National Grid hereby respectfully requests your consent to install and maintain approximately 1,900 feet, more or less, of 2-inch gas main in Stanford Drive from the existing 2-inch steel gas main on High Street, southerly, to the existing 2-inch steel gas main at Camelot Drive, all of which to replace and abandon the existing 2-inch steel main in Stanford Drive. So this is the entirety of Stanford Drive.
And Harry, it looks like Stanford is on the road schedule for this year.
That's correct.
Okay. Questions, Paula, Karen?
So this is a priority project then?
It is.
Same notice to the neighbors. Yeah, and I guess the only other thing I'd say is, I think the Main Street project to me really highlighted your partnership with us, because you worked through, at that meeting, a lot of additional kind of conditions and concerns. And so in addition to, I think partnering with us on our road building schedule, I've just been appreciative of your and National Grid's willingness to kind of help us work through the community aspect of this, so I appreciate it.
Just a question on kind of, we had the road building update, you're here, I'm kind of going back a little to that, but Harry, as we look at what's on your schedule for this year, and again, I realize the Main Street project is pretty big and pretty intense, are there any roads on this list where we should be replacing the gas main and we're not?
No, none.
Okay.
In fact, I mean, if you saw the map of gas main replacement in this town.
Yeah.
I mean, it's incredible what they've
No, I-
done over the last, 8 or
Appreciate
9
it,
years.
and Barbara, your predecessor, I remember when we had the road building plan, was, there was a question of whether National Grid was going to be able to keep up with us, and it seems like you are, and again, we really do appreciate that, and hope that it's to your benefit as well. Okay, any other questions about?
Just how long do you think this one will take?
This will probably be like 2 months.
Oh, wow, okay.
Wow, okay.
Move that we approve the request of National Grid to install and maintain approximately 1,900 feet of 2-inch gas main in Stanford Drive. This gas main will originate from the existing 2-inch main at High Street and continue under the paved surface of Stanford Drive for the entire length to completion at the existing 2-inch main at Camelot Drive. This gas main will replace an existing 2-inch coated steel decayed main that is approximately 52 years old. This approval is subject to the stipulation of the Department of Public Works as outlined in the letter dated February 14th, 2018.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, one and all.
Next on the agenda, we have 2 remaining warrant articles. The first one is Article X, which is to amend the general bylaw regarding the Hingham Affordable Housing Trust. Tom, is Emily going to join us?
Emily will join us.
Join us, Emily.
Emily Wentworth, the zoning board administrator.
Hi, Emily.
Hey, Emily.
So I'd be happy to provide a little
I would
background.
appreciate it, Emily. Thank you.
So Article X would amend the Housing Trust bylaw by specifically authorizing the trust to act as a lottery or monitoring agent for affordable housing units. Just by way of background, a lottery agent is primarily responsible for marketing units during the initial sales period. That includes preparation of an affirmative fair housing marketing plan, screening, and then selection of the initial buyers. A monitoring agent has some oversight responsibilities during the initial sales period, but then thereafter ensures compliance by the owners of the unit with 40B requirements and then the terms of their specific restriction. They also review refinance or capital improvement requests. And then if the unit owner opts to sell, they assist in marketing and then screening of income-eligible buyers. So this amendment, it authorizes the trust to act in these roles. It would not obligate them to do so. However, if they did choose to become either a lottery or a monitoring agent, they would realize potential compensation for acting in those capacities. The Housing Trust did review the article during its meeting last month, and a majority voted to support the article.
And for those who did not support the article, what were the reasons?
I think they had some concerns about their capacity as a volunteer board to serve in these very important roles. And so there'd have to be, I mean, it gives them the flexibility to act that way. We assume there would be a more robust dialogue about how they could fill these functions. Would they be doing that with staff through the trust? Would they be contracting out the responsibilities? Or would they opt not to act as a monitoring or lottery agent?
Karen or Paul, questions?
The functions, though, are pretty discrete, right? Like, you could take on a monitoring agent role for a particular sale project, and then you wouldn't have to do it. So you can sort of balance your bandwidth, whether you're working as a volunteer board or with staff, right?
Yep, so you wouldn't have to take on all monitoring of all of our units on the subsidized housing inventory. You could do it for one particular unit or one particular development. And you know, if circumstances change and they no longer have the capacity, they could look to have somebody else fill that role. They're really just acting as a third-party monitoring agent, and there's a contract that they're acting under. And if they can no longer fill the terms of the contract, they wouldn't be obligated.
They just wouldn't do it. And I know that Susan Murphy, special counsel to the town, has reviewed this, and what I gathered from her analysis was that this grant, it's like a grant of authority to the trust, then the trust has the discretion whether or not to step out and try to undertake some of these roles or not.
Yeah, it gives them a tool that they don't have to use if they choose not to.
Okay.
All right. Tom?
I just wanted to add that in the budget cycle this year, we requested additional hours within the zoning administration office for employee development. And part of the anticipated role of those additional hours of that employee's job description would likely include, I can't say definitively, but would likely include monitoring as part of the job.
So there'd be some staff hours available if they move.
If needed.
Okay. And do we have any sense of, if we don't fulfill this obligation adequately, would the trust be exposed to some liability for that? How does that work?
I would have to defer to council on that. I don't know.
Anything else? Someone like to make a motion?
This is a short one, I think I can do it. I move that we recommend favorable action on Article X, the Hingham Affordable Housing Trust Amendment to the General Bylaw.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Emily, before you, just before you leave the table, we don't get an opportunity to see you so much. And I want to make a note that just in appreciation and gratitude for the great work that you do all the time, but particularly in the last year with all of the 40B projects that we've had going on, you've had an awful lot of work to do, and you've had a number of people who have called looking for information and education on the process. And the overwhelming feedback that I've gotten from people who find this process difficult, they sometimes don't like the decisions. The one thing that I keep hearing from them is how appreciative they are of the information, of your professionalism, of your patience, of your willingness to take time with people. And I want to take this opportunity to thank you for that. It's been, for a lot of people who have had to navigate that, it can be difficult. You make it a lot easier, and we're just very grateful.
Thank you.
I would also like to take note of your significant and substantive participation in the South Hingham Working Group effort. That was huge. 3 nights, 3 years of night work on top of your existing duties. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you,
for coming
Emily.
tonight.
Have a good night. Next is Article AA. This is a perennial warrant article. Tom?
Sure. By way of introduction, if you don't mind, I'd like to read last year's comment, because AdCom nailed it and explained it really well. So the second paragraph of last year's comment simply reads, this article would allow the Board of Selectmen to accept such easements during the coming year, and thus to avoid potentially expensive delays and inconvenience to projects that benefit the town. This article is intended solely to cover easements voluntarily granted to the town, and would not allow the Board of Selectmen to accept easements that require funds to acquire them. Furthermore, the authority conferred by this article is not unlimited in time, but rather to a single year, which is why we have to do this every year. And it was, as we pointed out at the last meeting, simply, it is in fact a perennial.
Questions? Nope. I would just note that, when I was on the advisory committee, there was discussion about, should we just, give the selectmen this authority? And the advisory committee at the time said, no, we like the idea of going to town meeting to get approval for this once a year. And I think our feeling is that 1 year time horizon provides an additional check and balance that can be helpful. I'd make a motion to recommend favorable action on Article AA. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. I think that concludes the warrant. Yay. The next item on the agenda is a vote to release certain restrictions on CPA property that will be replaced with new conservation restrictions, and I think our conservation officer is
Pleasure of
here.
introducing superstar number 2 of the evening. Lonnie Fournier, our conservation.
It's a tough table over there.
Hello.
So I understand that you have a memo from Susan Murphy in
Yes.
your packets. I'm happy to provide a quick overview of that, or I
Please.
can answer questions, whatever you prefer. So Susan and I have been working on finalizing conservation restrictions on a number of properties in town for about the last year. The reason that the restrictions are required is because the properties were acquired with CPA funds. The conservation restriction then protects them in perpetuity under Article 97 of the Constitution. The second piece is that a conservation restriction is developed and overseen by a state agency, so there's a specific template and requirement for meeting the guidelines for a conservation restriction. In the process of doing title research for several of the properties that we've been working on, Susan uncovered documents that are titled restrictive covenants. They were created by the town council many years ago, and one thing that we know for certain is that they do not meet the requirements for a conservation restriction as identified by the state. So in order to keep our title clean for all of these properties, we're requesting the selectmen sign documents in front of you that would release those restrictive covenants that don't meet the parameters on a number of levels. And in turn, we will be recording conservation restrictions that fully meet all the requirements.
Questions?
I'm very pleased to see that you and council have gotten this done. This is needed and appreciated.
Karen?
Yeah, and this is one of those things that's hard to get to, but necessary to get to, so I agree with Paul. I really appreciate all your hard work to pull this together in a package that now we can be confident that we have the appropriate restrictions in place.
And I would just echo that and say that, you know, this is, we're also, I think that as we're acquiring new parcels, we're actually being proactive now and making sure that the due diligence is completed. So the good news is that once these are executed, we've got a good process in place. So yeah, there was a lot of work, and I understand that there were some personnel changes at the state level that made an already complex job a little bit more complex, and just really do appreciate that we've gotten these finished.
So this little two-step that we're doing, we release and record the new restriction all at the same time? Is that
Correct.
okay?
So I'll be responsible for recording the release that you sign off on tonight, and then the next document in the book and page at the registry will be the new conservation restriction. So there won't be a lag.
There won't be a lapse. That's
Okay.
what I asked.
That's what
There's
I want
no
to know.
lag.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you want to make a motion?
Sure. I move favorable action on the execution of 4 instruments, each entitled Release of Restrictive Covenant affecting the properties known as the McCormick property located off Levitt Street and the Hatch Dunlap property located off Pleasant Street, which restrictions shall be replaced by conservation restrictions in the form required by Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 44B, Section 12.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, last week, we recommended a balanced budget that the advisory committee is considering, I believe, as we speak. And in the votes, we talked in general about some votes, but after the meeting, Tom recommended that we specifically vote dollar amounts for debt service benefits and other operating expenses, just for clarity. So we adopted sort of a total budget, we adopted some budget pages, but this is kind of belt and suspenders. So there are three recommended votes that are down below.
5.
Oh, sorry, 5. They correspond to the budget that we voted
Okay.
and recommended for the advisory consideration last week. So I would say these are procedural.
Move to approve the total debt service budget of $8,747,261.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. I move that we approve the total employee benefit budget of $12,786,282.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Move to approve the total unclassified budget of $665,008.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. I move that we approve the total enterprise fund budget of $2,123,677.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Move to approve the total MWRA charges of $1,975,493.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. I know that we have a couple appointments to be made. I might suggest to my colleagues that we defer that until our next meeting. We had gotten some, I think that there were a couple of additional talent bank
Yep, yep.
applications, and I'd like to make sure we all have the time to give those due consideration. So I would ask that when we meet 2 weeks from today, that we all come in prepared to vote. We have 2 positions for registrar of voters for someone who is a registered Republican, and 1 position for a registered Democrat. We've got a couple other couple other votes.
One-day liquor license. Oh, no, what is it? Yeah, right?
Pledge of license.
Pledge of license. Okay. It was close. I don't have any questions.
I'm good.
Shocking.
Awesome. Sorry.
Oh, gee.
Did I say that? No. Move to approve the request of MJH Inc., DBA Main Street Market and Deli, for a pledge of license to Rockland Trust, subject to the approval of the Massachusetts Alcoholic Beverages Control Commission.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Tom, we have a vote to sign a renewal of an intermunicipal agreement with South Shore Recycling, but could you just kind of,
This has been fully procured.
Okay.
So everything is, everything has been done through our fees are as dictated through that procurement process.
okay. Any questions from my colleagues?
Nope.
Okay, someone like to make a motion?
Sure. I move that we sign a 5-year renewal for the intermunicipal agreement with South Shore Recycling Cooperative effective July 1, 2018.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Tom, anything for a report for this evening? Okay. Karen?
I am assuming that you're going to go over the performance of our departments for the storm.
Why don't
No,
you go
no,
ahead?
you go ahead.
No,
I'm
no,
going to
no,
save my
no.
voice. I'm going to
Go
save my
ahead.
voice.
No,
No, that's the chair's role.
oh,
That's all I have.
Although, when Mary says it, I join in her silently.
pressure's on me.
But one thing I want to do, because I didn't come from the advisory board, I came from the planning board, I want to thank my colleagues on the planning board for the fine work they've done to advance the proposed ADU bylaw. Some of you may recall that we spoke about that in August of last year, and the planning board has set aside many hours of its very precious time. At this point, they're meeting 2 and 3 times a week, so the commitment of your fellow citizens to this mission is impressive. But nonetheless, it goes to the advisory committee tomorrow night, and I just want to thank Chair Jennifer Gay Smith, Sarah Corey, William Ramsey, and Gordon Carr for the hard work they put in to advancing this to the stage that it's at. This is something that's been, what in my view, has been a need in this town for quite some time. And I've seen it in my various travels and different roles I've had. And I'm very glad that they picked up this need and have advanced it. I'm hoping that it enjoys a fulsome support at town meeting.
You're here.
Okay. No, I don't think that there are adequate words to express this board's appreciation to all of the departments and all of the hardworking people who helped Hingham get through the storm, Storm Riley, started naming storms, relatively unscathed. I do know that there were some trees uprooted, there was some damage, there were a little bit of power outage, but in particular, we had some utilities in earlier this evening, and I think Hingham Light has set the bar for service, not just here in Hingham, but across the state. I think that we had a number of conversations with Paul Henue. He and his team were ready. We got feedback that people were answering the phone when they called. Teams were out. I believe maybe there were a couple hundred customers who were affected. Nothing more than, I heard of a transformer that blew and maybe some people were out for about 6 hours. But unfortunately, right now, there are still some of our fellow residents in other communities who are still in the dark right now. And as I said, it's hard to put into words our appreciation and admiration for Hingham Light. It's not just a matter of Hingham Light being here and being responsive when there's an issue. this speaks to the manner in which they take care of their equipment, they take care of the assets, they make sure that the trees are trimmed. They really just do a fantastic job. And, to Paul Henue and to his team, we just say thank you. We're also very appreciative of the Public Works, the Hingham Police Department, the Hingham Fire Department, for all their work in conjunction with that. I would also just mention that in the last week, we weathered the storm and we had a new fire chief on duty. Last week, Robert Olson retired after
41 years.
41
Yeah.
years. 41 years of service. There was a beautiful ceremony. Steve Murphy was promoted to fire chief. He led the efforts on the town's behalf and demonstrated to everybody why he deserves to be the fire chief. Paul Karen and I had the pleasure last night of attending a promotion ceremony within the fire department. Deputy LaChance, Deputy Powers were promoted. We had a couple other promotions. It was a
Lieutenant Becker, Lieutenant Wilcox.
lieutenant and captain. Yes. And it was a wonderful ceremony for the fire department, for the firefighters, for their families. And
Really nice.
it was really a
They had the truck sideways in the
Yeah.
bay once again, so it's pretty.
I'm coming early next time to watch that.
we've been practicing three-point turns in our house, and I'm in awe of what they did. But anyway, it was just a really, really wonderful. But again, our thanks and appreciation to everybody who helped out. And we also know there were citizens who were looking after neighbors and friends who needed assistance in this and other communities. So again, our thanks. This board will actually not be meeting next Tuesday. We've been going at it at a pretty hectic pace, but our next scheduled meeting will be 2 weeks from tonight, which will be March 20th. At this point, the board will convene an executive session under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A2, to conduct a strategy session in preparations for negotiations with non-union personnel and/or conduct contract negotiations with non-union personnel, interim town administrator Thomas Mayo, regarding potential contract and appointment as town administrator. The board will not return to an open session. By roll call vote?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Good night, everybody.
everybody.
Thank you.